All right, we have this problem right here that we have something similar to the widget problem earlier, except this time each shift produces a different type of widget, and each of those widgets sell for a different price. So $10 first shift, $25 second shift, $50 third shift, and they want to know how much, what is the value of the widgets that they produce in each of the shifts, and then what is the total of those widgets. So the first thing we're going to do is start with the output, and what do they want out? And they want the value of shift 1, so we'll say shift 1 value, and then shift 2 value, then shift 3 value. So they want those first for those three things, and then they want the total value. So we'll put down here total value. All right, so the next thing we have to do is figure out, well, where are we going to get these things from? And we can't ask them what the value of the first shift is because all they know is how many widgets they have produced. So we have to do math for each one of these four. So I'm just going to copy these and then paste them into the calculations section because I have to figure out what calculations I need to do in order to do that. And then once we do that, because it's not very hard math, we're good to go. Now before we start doing any math down here, what I recommend that you do, I don't like that there, that should be an A, small a. There we go. Something I call low-hanging fruit. Anytime you see numbers in our problem, those are what we call constants, and that is the $10 per widget for that they do the first shift is not going to change anytime soon. So it's going to be every time they run the program is always going to be 10. So the best thing to do is to start by after figuring out what your output is and where you're going to get your output from, is go ahead and document our constants. So we have a basic widget rate, and that is equal to $10. And then we have a premium widget rate, and that is equal to $25. And then we have a super widget rate, and that is equal to $50. Again, I have small characters except for the first letter of the second, third, fourth, fifth word, and we do that. It's called camel notation, and that's going to make our job a little bit easier later on when we do our human algorithm. All right, well then the next thing we have to do is start with our last calculation and move up. So the reason why we start with the last calculation is it allows us to have the most efficient math, and as a clue, usually this last math has something to do with the math you do above it. So the total value is actually when we add these three values together. So what I'm going to do is copy and paste. I'm going to say, well, if I take the first shift value and I add that, and I add that to the second shift value, come on, and I add that to the third shift value, that's going to give me my total value. Alright, so there's my 3. I don't like it wrapping. Okay, so then I move myself up and I say, okay, well, how would I calculate the shift 3 value? Well, I know that the third shift is our super widget, so all I need to know is how many are produced in the third shift. So I'm going to call that shift 3. Okay, that's the number of widgets we produce in the third shift. I can call it whatever I want. I want to call it that. And I'm going to multiply that by the super widget rate, and that's going to provide me the value of the widgets that are produced during that shift. And then as I move up, it's going to be the same math. It's that I'm going to have a shift 2, and I want to multiply that by the premium widget rate. So I'll copy and paste that. And then the first thing I'm going to do is I have a shift 1, and I'm going to multiply that by the basic widget rate. So I have done all the math, so I've come up with everything I need. The only thing I don't know is shift 1, shift 2, shift 3. What is that? Well, it's either something that's going to be provided to us every time we run the program, or something that never changes. If it never changes, it's this up here, and we know that the widgets are going to change every day. Every time they do a shift, they're going to do a different number of widgets. So we have to ask them. So that means I'm going to take shift 1 and copy and paste it into my first input, and then shift 2 and paste that underneath there, and shift 3, copy that and paste it underneath. Well, I have just created a problem statement. I started out first by taking a look at what output was necessary, and they told me exactly what that was up here. They said to provide us with produce a report that tells us the value produced for each shift, shift 1, shift 2, shift 3, and the total value. So those 4 things is what they wanted to know, and we documented them here. Then we said, well, these all have to be math done by calculations, so I copied them and pasted them up here. Then, before I got started on these calculations, I said, well, there must be some low-hanging fruit, and that is, let's document all our constants. So we know we have 10, 25, and 50 that should be documented, and we put those into our assumptions. And then we figured out that total value is the addition of these 3, so we documented that, and I copy and pasted as I went through, so all my names are consistent. The last thing we want to add is to our assumptions is, well, what else are we assuming? And we're assuming that 3 rates and 3 different widgets and 1 factory. Okay, we want to make these assumptions because I want to sit down with my user with this problem statement and say, so there's only 3 rates, correct? And he goes, yes, there's only 3 rates. But then he goes, oh, well, at Christmas time we make a super duper widget, that's $100. Well, that means that this solution will not work. When we want to use that 4th type of widget, I must redo my problem. Same with 1 factory. And I say, okay, well, we're only going to do this at 1 factory. And he goes, yes, we're going to do it at 1 factory, but we also want to total up from the 4 other factories we have. And say, okay, well, this is not going to do that. And you didn't tell me to do that in there. And that's why you might be saying that, well, if they don't tell us that in the here, then why are we worrying about it down here? Well, the user is going to tell us everything they think we need to know. As a programmer, we need to make sure that those requirements are all the requirements we need. So we need to ask them questions about what we have formulated in our minds as the, I assume this is true. They verify it. So if I don't ask the right questions, then I get a bad solution. And it's all my fault as a bad programmer for not gathering the requirements necessary. Alright, so next thing we're going to go ahead and create a human algorithm from this problem statement.